So the person you think you are, that's not you. That's a survival strategy created by the child in you decades ago. Today, we're going to talk about how that was created and what happens when we finally see through that illusion. So if you're ready, 1, 2, 3, go. So my partner in time today is Garon Niemeyer. Garon has a degree in transpersonal psych, and he leads a double life as a counselor in private practice and also does coaching and development as an organizational consultant in the business and finance world. And my understanding is he's thinking about combining these two, which is going to be a really interesting practice. So welcome to the Crack Between the Worlds. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. The subject today is a fascinating subject for both of us, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking about, I don't even know what to call it, the illusion of self and the concept of the sense of self, and how do we evolve something that doesn't even appear real. So that's the long-term conversation. Today, we're really talking about the illusion of self.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the illusion of self.
So the thing is that we have this idea that we have a coherent self and that it's just one thing and that we move from that place. And that is not true. That is not true at all. In fact, we have, and I'm going to give an example of this, but we have basically a story and a strategy, and we've been living unconsciously in that story and strategy that we've designed to survive and developed an ego. And the ego has become so important that it has become the thing we call me, or the thing I call I, is this thing that is not real. It's this artificial intelligence, for lack of a better way of describing it. And that we have, I'm going to sort of flesh this out. And I'm going to sort of lay this out and we'll flesh it out. We have this idea of what we're supposed to be, this idealized self-image, that we need to be this in order to be good enough to be loved or whatever. And that when we don't measure up to that, then our ego is scrambling because it can't not be that. So it scrambles to rationalize and justify, to judge and blame, to do anything it can, and so we will break the character that we're playing, for lack of a better way to describe it, and we'll break it often. We're scrambling to maintain the illusion of coherence, the illusion of self.
The illusion of coherence, yeah. And the idealized part is important.
Incredibly important.
Right. It's the thing that we're like tracking towards unconsciously.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to feel into the fact of if you were to look at the experience someone's having as a self, like how do they orient around this kind of map you're giving? Right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about, is how you see, kind of backing up almost, you laid out some...
Right.
Like, how do they feel this? What does it feel like to be in the state of the self, as you're saying, or the illusion of the state of the self?
So let's do a thought experiment.
Yeah.
Okay, and I invite everybody out there to join me, if you're not driving a car or heavy machinery or something, to take a moment and just imagine, maybe you have young children. Maybe you're raising kids and you remember when they were infants. Or maybe you have some idea of what it was like to be an infant, but an infant comes into this world and they're pretty much like pure consciousness. You know, they are just experiencing the world. They're putting things in their mouth. They're putting their hands in their mouth. They're touching their tips. Everything to them is senses. Nothing is taken for granted. Senses are everything. And they're taking everything in and they're just being themselves. They're just happy or unhappy to be here. I love infants because if they're happy, their whole body's happy. If they're crying, their whole body is crying. It's so cool. But the infant is this pure consciousness. And this is a model. Let me just start off by saying this is a model. This is not exactly how things work. This is a map. This is an idea that we use that isn't necessarily the truth, but gives us a way to understand. Even when we talk about the idealized self-image, there is no, that's just a model.
Right.
We don't even know if that really exists. So the model is that this infant then, as it's evolving, starts to realize that it's being molded, that it's being told how to behave, that it's not okay to do certain things. Like the infant wants to grab mommy's breast and squeeze, and mom's like, no, 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 you can't do that, or they grab somebody's nose, and then it goes on to them becoming 1 year old, and they learn what is okay and what's not okay. No, you can't put that in your mouth. No, you can't touch that. It's sharp. That's hot. All these things, and all of these things for an infant are just the infant being itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's learning that it's not okay to be itself. This isn't good or bad or right or wrong. It's the flaw of the human psyche. It's just how we evolve.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes even more personal as we get older. Like, no, Garon, it's not okay for you to be angry. No, you have to finish eating your food, stuff like this. And we learn that our sense of self is something different than we think. And so as we go through that, the first thing we learn is there's something wrong with me. I can't just be me. That if I be me, I'm going to disappoint them. I'm going to make them unhappy. And it's, I think, primal that if our parents aren't happy with us, we question capacity for survival.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like existential.
Yeah. At that age, especially, right? Like your parents are literal gods to your understanding.
Yes.
So for you to upset them or to risk love, affection is to risk your safety.
Yes.
Right. So at the age where we imprint these images, it is, I would argue, existential.
Right.
It feels that way versus, as I know you're alluding to, as we get older, now it gets a little wonky.
Right.
Yeah. We start to carry those images forward.
Right. So then we have the story.
Mm-hmm.
On some level, the story always boils down to there's something wrong with me.
Mm.
It could be I'm not enough. It could be I'm too much.
Mm-hmm.
It could be something, but there's something wrong with me. And maybe I learned that if I'm a good boy, that I get most of my needs met and I don't get hit or punished or hurt. So then I become a good boy. Maybe if I'm a good boy and my parents aren't around very much, they're both working, and I'm, that
Mm-hmm.
no matter how good I am, I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting the attention and affection and that I need to know that I'm okay, that I'm going to survive existentially. So then maybe I decide to become a rebel, to make more noise and be getting like, notice me now, So these are, the story is there's something wrong with me. The survival strategy is this is what I'm going to do in order to make sure that I survive.
Yeah. And in that process, I think what is so key to it is it's self-limiting, right? We make these strategies which limit ourselves some way, even in, as you talk about the rebellious person, right? The rebellious strategy. You're likely limiting parts of sensitivity, parts of connection, parts of the softer, subtle frequencies.
And that strategy may have been the best thing we could possibly do in order to survive. It's not like it was a wrong thing. It may have been our best friend. But the thing is as we go through that as an infant and a child, all of that is unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
There is a story that I'm not enough. There is a story that I need to be a good boy or a rebel or whatever. But it's unconscious. I'm just doing it. It just becomes me. And with that, the story and the strategy that I'm making up to do that becomes basically the ego. It becomes this artificial intelligence, this mental me that is strategizing how to be in the world, because just being me is not okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ego becomes that manager state almost that is looking at those parts that have been exiled, have been self-limited, and takes those and makes sure they stay there. And again, to your point, most of that's happening in what we would consider an unconscious fashion.
Right.
And when it does become conscious at all, when those come out, we dissociate. So it's not even like we stay consciousness for that. Mostly we leave ourselves in some energetic way, and we kind of have these moments, and then maybe we realize something weird happened, but we don't really process it, right? It never really comes fully into consciousness if you're just moving through life without examining this.
So it's like what you're saying is that in that moment, this unconscious process hijacks the system.
Yeah.
And then we dissociate. The conscious me dissociates because it doesn't fit in with, or because more that there's a gap between the unconscious and the consciousness, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't exist in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
So if this energy of the unconscious gets big enough, then the conscious self has to dissociate.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part of, again, kind of thinking of the self as I would say most people think of the self initially before examination of any kind as the ego, as this idea that you're alluding to.
Right.
That's
They
the
think
first
that
illusion.
that ego thing is the self.
Right.
Identify with that as being me.
Illusion one.
Right.
Like at that point, not you. We've just talked about, and many people, obviously this is, basic to a lot of psychology. There's a whole different depth of yourself that you're unaware of. So unearthing that through some process, some map, some way of having someone help you become conscious of that, or some experience in your life that just does it, right? Because I think that's a lot of the movement of this unconscious energy, this psyche that's repressed, is it wants platform,
right?
It wants expression, like it is held in a cage and it wants to come out. And so that's why the energy that you lose by trying to keep that thing behind closed doors is immense. So back to why it's important is the constriction of the idea of self being the ego is so limiting. It takes energy from you and robs you of life force, robs you of a way of moving through the world in that way.
And this is so important. And we're going to dive into that in more depth in time.
Yeah.
But this is really, really big what you're describing. It has everything to do with our lack of power, our lack of energy, our lack of source. If you're going to find a way to become more powerful, there's no better spiritual practice than working with your unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only is it using up energy that you don't get to use, but as you're saying, it's working against you.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into that in future conversations. And so then coming back to that place, here's this ego that we think is me, and it's deeply unconscious. That the structure that's holding this together, the idea that there's something wrong with me, the idea that I'm become now this strategy, and this strategy is who I am. This survival strategy we made up at ages 3, 4, 5, 6, we're still using them today unconsciously. The survival strategy of a 6-year-old is running the show still today. And this comes now to the point where maybe we can even talk about the idealized self-image. Do you want to say something about that?
I mean, I think you're pointing to it well, right? I mean, you kind of what we've said. I tend to think of as a image in my head often, as you said, the infant that comes in seemingly blank, right? If we want to leave it at that, like a blank piece of paper to me. And these interactions with the world and the environment that start to create the self are like crinkling the paper. It starts to take texture and form, and it creates an idea of itself, and that becomes its idealized image. It thinks it's that form, right? So it has to live up to those forms. So those same images that were bestowed or instilled or tyrannically given to it, to a child, become the seeming laws it's locked itself into, right? It feels like a law. And that's the discovery for a lot of this, I think, for people. For me, it was heavily starting to notice these images that I would say something that felt like a universal truth, right? That, all women will manipulate my emotions.
Right.
And it's not like I'm sitting here in a moment like this, it'd be in the middle of dialogue with you, just seemingly, and it just slips out, right? It doesn't come out if you look for it very directly often. It's kind of like this thing that you're hiding. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, all women emotionally manipulate. And it's like, ooh, there's the sense of that idealized self, this idea of an image of yourself that the world is a certain way and you're a certain way inside of it. It's a boundary line of that to me.
So, and that's great. So, and I want to give a personal experience of my own idealized self-image to kind of flesh this out even more. So I was the rebel, right? I grew up in the world where my parents were both really busy. I don't think their parents paid a lot of attention to them. So they didn't really know how to do that. And not that they were bad parents. It's the parent's job to wound the child. No matter how good a parent you are, your child could probably use therapy. But right.
Yeah, I agree.
But I could not it was impossible for me to get enough attention. It was impossible for me to get the attention I needed. And attention was the closest thing I got to love. My parents were not good at affection and these kind of things. It wasn't something they were really good at. And I don't blame them. I don't think their parents were good at it. I don't think it was a culturally important thing. But so for me, I realized I needed to be something really amazing in order to be good enough. I couldn't just be good at something. I needed to be really good at it. This influenced everything I did. Everything I chose to do and needed to be this big, or I wasn't enough. So it's fed by the story I have that I'm not enough. And the need I have to get something, which is attention. That's why I was a rebel. That's the closest thing I could get was attention. And then I needed to be this big in order to feel like I was going to get enough attention to equate the love I'd never got. That makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, the pulling an image out like I did, talking about, I said, I think one that was more true for me was that women are needy. So, right, I point that out as like a fragment of an image that leads to this idealized self. That what mine was more is I'm going to be this strong, independent. I'm not going to have anyone that's, I don't need anything from anyone else. And I've rejected the neediness in myself. So the idealized version of me doesn't have any needs. I can take care of myself. I'm good, right? And so those are just loaded, these idealized self-images, kind of the shorthand constellation name for the constellation of images that make it up, right? And so the discovery work to me in that, right, is so much of that, peeling that apart and figuring out that these are illusions. This idea of the self is an illusion. This idealized self is an illusion.
So we're piecing together this thing to present to the world. This is the self I think I'm supposed to be, or this is the mask.
Right.
The mask is either this is how I think you want me to be, present, or this is how I want you to see me, present, right? And we may use both of those depending on the circumstances we're in.
And the painful irony of it is that universal pervasive sense of lack that we all feel and manifest in some way is just furthered by the idealized self-image, because by its very definition, as hopefully comes clear, it's idealized. You cannot attain it.
Right.
So we just fall into this perpetual vicious cycle throughout our lives if we remain unconscious to it, that there's this idea of myself that I can never quite get to. So I don't feel good enough inside, but I'm not going to show that to the world. I'm going to try harder to double down, triple down, quadruple down.
Right.
All my chips. And then it just keeps tumbling.
So it feeds the initial story that was a lie to begin with.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Self-reinforcing. You're stuck in a samsaric circle of that.
Yeah. Yes. So then we are presenting a mask and we're putting the pieces up to make it all fit. It's so that I can look like I'm supposed to look like. I'm this good, I'm this amazing, or I don't need anything. I can take care of myself. I present that mask. And then something happens and I'm not that thing. I'm not that good. And then I have to find a way to make that not be there. Right? I might blame somebody else, or it's your fault. You did this. Anything I can do to not take responsibility for the not being the idealized self-image I'm trying to be, not presenting the mask it's your fault.
Blame or rationalization, some way of just trying to not feel the fullness of it, right? There's a deflection. That energy's a lot.
Right.
It made me think, actually, in a more narrative form, that more at a pragmatic level, that was how I came to see you, right? Because I think a lot of people finally might go seek some form of therapeutic support when the idealized self-image has been cracked.
Right.
They don't know that that's not their conscious thing, because most people come in wanting it to be repaired. Then they're like, well, yeah, something's wrong. I need to get back to that.
Right.
They don't realize that the whole thing is causing the issue, but it's
great description.
like, oh, that's
right.
it. And I came in after having my heart broke, and it was rejection. And I'd never experienced rejection in my life from a woman like that I wanted, right? I was always the one to back out first. I was in control.
I don't need anything anyway.
Right. And all of a sudden I gave up control in this moment. I started to fall in love. And sure enough, the world did me a solid and just dropped me straight on my ass. And so I came into you because there was a big dent now in this place where it's like, oh yeah, like I'm no longer this idealized version. What do I do now? Right. I think that's such an entryway to seeing the illusion of this idealized self-image and the idea that the ego is the central axis to the self. For me, the way when we get into this, which is a bit more, I don't know if it's fully metaphysical, but it is a bit, right? Like I best kind of hold for myself the idea of the self and that orientation as a relational process, right? The fact that it's a verb, not a noun. And the ego, it's a noun. Here I am, I'm right here. This is my thoughts. I'm having this experience. I can hold
the state of being.
Right. I am right here, right? It's always right here. And when you soften that and you start to, as you're talking about, feel this more in that dreamlike quality, which I would argue resonates more with your actual experience as you explore it, and play with that nature of awareness. It's a verb. It's not, you aren't a self, you're selfing.
I love it when you say that. It's such a great description.
Yeah, right. It does. And it feels, again, like I've been, through the work with you and then on into my own horizons. It's never ending to go into those places. And the more you can steep into your own experience, the more it feels like that, right? Nothing really feels solid and material. Everything feels you can't find the boundaries of it. And so the self is a great point of like,
right.
I mean, right. We're not sitting here bringing something new. There's been thousands of years of traditions, Buddhists, Hindu people pointing at, show me the self. If it's a thing, then show it to me.
Right.
Where is it? Apprehend it.
And science has tried to locate the self.
Right.
Unsuccessfully.
How do you see it? So we talked about, I think maybe there's some intuitive sense, hopefully, and maybe not, but some more intuitive sense around if I don't identify with my ego, which is a very narrow, as we said, limited idea of myself. Okay. And then the idealized self as kind of an extension of the ego, right? It's kind of like the ego pointing towards, well, let's go towards that, right? It's a hypertrophy of the things that I want you to focus on.
Right.
So if we can see through those two illusions and we get to this place of then, what is the self in the more metaphysical way you're talking about? What is the benefit for people of moving away from these more conditioned ways of seeing themselves into something that is quite unknown and arguably is unknowable? I wouldn't even say arguably, is unknowable.
What is the benefit? So it's a good question. We are living this life. We're sleepwalking through life. We're sleepwalking through a consensus reality that we don't even know we agreed upon, right? And we are living from this survival strategy of a 7-year-old, right? That has this belief that we're not good enough. We're not living in anything that's reality. It's all an illusion, all of that. So is there anything that isn't an illusion? That's a really interesting question.
Totally.
But what I do know is that when I can challenge that, then all of the patterns that I fall into, all the mistakes that I've made over and over again, all the ways that I blame everybody else for that I'm a victim, they all get to change when I see that the story isn't real, that the strategy I'm using and the ego isn't real. It's not really me. Then I get to begin navigating reality consciously. So that's kind of how I see it. Does that make sense? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I think the conscious aspect, right, that's essentially where you arrive is you realize all the unconscious nature of these other models. And I think you made a really critical point in there about it's all built on agreements we didn't actually consciously make.
Right.
Either we did it as a child, as we talked about, for survival in some sense, or it was indoctrinated to us in a system that believes this is a material world that follows Newtonian laws and subscribes to centuries-old physics. Right. And so and I guess in the most boiled down point, it's self-limitation. Like that's what it leads to versus when you see through and pierce that and you move through it, you have this ability to bring this powerful construct into your life, which is conscious awareness of your experience at levels that are far more subtle and far more inexplicable, I would argue, right? You get beyond these conceptual boxes in this flat earth that we kind of stuck in.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hearing you say, and I agree, right? The benefit is the texturizing, the relationship you have to living your life. So it's
this experience of the place I'm living from is holding me down, holding me back. I'm living in an unhappy state that I've unconsciously agreed to, that there's something wrong with me.
Right.
And then that I can wake up from that illusion and begin navigating this world differently. So I think there's another place to go from here, but I want to pause here and we'll pick this up for the second part of this episode. Is that okay?
Yeah, great.
Great. Well, so we'll be back. Thank you for joining us, and be good to you. The Crack Between the Worlds is conceived and hosted by Mark Wald, produced, engineered, and edited by Lloyd Lemmerman. Music composed by Kindly, a Turning on the Lights production. For updates, visit Crack Between the Worlds and our Instagram @The Crack Between the Worlds.